Well, hello, Social 30-1 students. We have come to the last couple chapters of the semester. We have looked at what ideologies is to begin with. We have looked at how liberalism was formed, ultimately rejected, and we have subsequently looked at if it's viable. Now, the last couple chapters just try to kind of put it all together. The theme of chapters 13 and 14 is citizenship. Now that you know about liberalism, now that you know about ideologies, what to do next? Okay, what is your responsibility as a citizen? What perhaps are your rights, etc. Mostly theoretical in nature. We're not going to get into too much nitty-gritty detail. That's for you to do subsequent readings and research on your own. I just see myself as a bit of a locksmith. I gave you some keys to kind of think about, and then with those keys, you go looking and investigating on your own. So, anyways, the theme of chapter 13 and 14 is citizenship. To what extent should my actions as a citizen be shaped by ideology? All right, so we're looking now at related issue 4. To what extent should my actions as a citizen be shaped by an ideology? All right. Outcome: students will assess their rights, roles, responsibilities as citizens, and then you have certain specific outcomes. Students will appreciate the relationship between citizenship and leadership. You will exhibit a global consciousness with respect to the human condition and world issues, and accept responsibilities associated with individual and collective citizenship. More things you'll be looking at in related issue 4. Explore the relationship between personal and collective worldviews and ideology. Explore how ideologies shape individual and collective citizenship. Analyze perspectives on the rights, roles, responsibilities of the individual in a democratic society. For example, respect for law and order, the ability to dissent, showing civility, being involved politically with participation, and citizen advocacy. 4.7 says analyze perspectives on the rights, roles, responsibilities of individuals during times of conflict, humanitarian crises that we looked at in chapter 9, civil rights movements, anti-war movements, McCarthyism that we looked at in chapter 7, pro-democracy movements, and contemporary or modern day examples. 4.8 deals with to evaluate the extent to which ideology should shape responses to contemporary issues. Once again, contemporary things that are going on right now in our world. Develop strategies to address local, national, and global issues that demonstrate individual and collective leadership. And then finally, explore opportunities to demonstrate active and responsible citizenship through individual and collective action. So in a nutshell, ideology and citizenship related issue 4 deals with the following factors. In units 1, 2, and 3, we explored ideologies in general and liberalism in particular. However, in part 4 of this course, it introduces you to the relationship between ideology and active individual and collective citizenship. Once again, I strongly recommend that before you listen to, or maybe even a sandwich kind of technique, when you're listening to these or watching these presentations, that you read the content in the textbook, or go beyond the textbook and look at further things, current events, issues, etc. So in other words, what do you think about the extent to which you should exhibit global consciousness of the human condition on local, national, and global issues? It asks you to read the opening on page 440. It says, read about Greg Mortenson's commitment to take action and to demonstrate responsible citizenship in isolated regions of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Consider the following questions as you read. To what extent do ideas in the source present a possible response to the related issue for Part 4? To what extent should my actions as a citizen be shaped by an ideology? To what extent do the ideas in the source article present a possible response to the chapter issues for Part 4? To what extent should ideology shape responses to issues in times of peace and in times of conflict? And finally, to what extent should an ideology shape your thinking and actions as a citizen? Another thing to look at in your textbook, read pages 441. Reflect on the beliefs about citizenship shared by Andrew Coyne and Mark Kingswell. Do you believe that you have a moral imperative? That something, a person, a community, a person, or a nation state chooses to do because it's the right thing to do, regardless of how difficult it is or how many people are opposed to it, to take action. Why would you act on your moral imperative? What is behind that? And to what extent should my actions as a citizen be shaped by an ideology? Obviously, you do things because you believe in them. Why do you believe in them? That is based on an ideology, value systems, worldviews, etc., that has been formed perhaps through many years of experience. All right, various terms that you'll have to be aware of throughout chapters 13 and 14. I won't go over them here, but throughout the lesson, and more than likely I'm going to break this into two segments. But here they are, as you can see. All right, on to the lesson. So citizenship. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, by Margaret Mead. Very famous quote, read by then President John F. Kennedy, who was inaugurated in, I believe, January of 1961. His famous, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Here is the famous clip for your viewing pleasure. So think about that quote. According to President Kennedy, what does it mean to be a citizen? Do you have to be active to be a citizen? Maybe not necessarily, but he maybe is asking, well, should you be active as a citizen and why? Okay. To have citizenship, to have rights and freedoms, according to Kennedy and his perspective, may entail certain responsibilities, or else you might lose those rights and freedoms. And finally, what are actions that a citizen does? What are some of the things as you, as a future citizen, I mean, you're all coming up on 18 years of age at this point, and you'll be able to vote in elections, etc. What can you do to be more active? All right, so there's different meanings of citizenship that we're going to go over. There's the jus soli way of citizenship, the jus sanguinis idea of citizenship, and the more modern way of thinking through naturalization. All right. But before we get into that, let's just look at the list of rights and freedoms that Canadians generally believe that we have or are responsible for. So some of the rights and freedoms that we have, of course, are outlined in the Charter that we talked about in chapter, I believe, 11. Legal rights, equality rights, mobility rights, those are all individual freedoms. You have the collective rights of Aboriginal people's rights. Okay. You have freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of peaceful assembly, all outlined in the fundamental freedom section of the Charter. However, you also have responsibilities as a Canadian citizen. You have the responsibility to obey laws. You have the responsibility to express your opinion freely while respecting the rights and freedoms of others. We do not live alone in this world. We have to live with others, and we have to think about the welfare of others even as we do speak. It's a slippery slope. It's kind of hard to kind of maintain from time to time. We have the responsibility to help others in the community. We have the responsibility to care for and protect our heritage, our environment, and to eliminate discrimination and injustice. Okay, and like I said, we could spend time debating on the levels in which we have those responsibilities, but I think those are generally responsibilities that are accepted by most citizens. So let's look a little bit closer at these principles, jus soli and jus sanguinis. The first, jus soli, stands for the right of the soil. A person's citizenship or nationality is determined by their place of birth. So if you are born in Canada, you're Canadian. If you're born in the United States, you're an American. If you're born in France, you're French. Regardless where perhaps your parents came from, even an ethnicity issue that some countries would certainly have an issue with. Okay, so that's the first principle. The second principle some countries would feel more strongly about is jus sanguinis, and that is the right of blood. That citizenship and nationality of a child is the same as the natural parents, wherever the child is born. It doesn't matter where you're born. If your nationality is American, your parents are American, you have the right to be an American. If you're German, your parents are German, but your parents were born somewhere, you were born somewhere else because your parents were away, you have the right to that German citizenship. Okay. And then there's a third one, and that is naturalization. It is another common determiner of citizenship. This is where you immigrate to a country, and then over a period of time, you become a citizen of that country through a process called naturalization. All right, citizenship as a verb is active, not passive. Okay, we need to understand that there's political and civic participation, and there's this concept called citizenship advocacy. Okay, be an active person. Take part in your government. Take part in your political systems. Make sure that your MLAs and your MPs and your congressmen and your senators and your prime ministers, etc., are all accountable to the people that vote them in. All right, there's a few more concepts here. One is called patriotism, and one is called pacifism. I'm not going to show these videos. You are perfectly welcome to look at them on your own. But, one comes from a certainly more right-wing perspective, and maybe one comes from more of a left-wing perspective. Okay? Patriotism obviously is the devotion to your nation state. Okay, not so much nationalism, which is the devotion to a group of people, whereas patriotism is more political in nature. Where this concept of pacifism is the belief that violence is never an answer or never a response to any kind of conflict. Okay, there were a lot of people during the Vietnam War era that considered themselves pacifists because they did not want to fight in that war in Vietnam. Okay, there's lots of religious groups that believe in pacifism. Okay, non-combatants, non-believers, etc. Basically, certain religious groups, and then people in general that were pacifists in nature. All right, just a couple other things before I end off this first video. This is showing you an excerpt from the front matter of the Alberta Social Studies curriculum. I'm not sure if I left this in, but if I did, it just kind of highlights what it means to be a citizen according to the Alberta government. Okay, and I may warn you, their idea of a citizen isn't just something that you can just take without having a certain amount of responsibility. So according to the government of Alberta, citizenship means, okay, and just look at the preamble. And like I said, all the words that I highlighted in red are the ones I want you to focus on. Social studies provides opportunities for students to develop the attitudes, skills, and knowledge that will enable them to become engaged, active, informed, and responsible citizens. So whenever I get that crazy question, why the heck are we learning about social studies? I'm never going to use this stuff ever again in my life. Well, the answer I try to give them is somewhat that is outlined in that sentence. Basically, I make it a little bit simpler. I want you to be a critical thinker. I want you to be able to look at issues from various different angles. I want you to be a responsible citizen or society that can make thoughtful decisions based on what is best perhaps for your family, what is best for your community, etc. All right. I don't think I'll read that whole preamble. Feel free to pause me if you would like and read that on your own. There's also a Canadian citizenship oath. All right. All citizenship applicants over the age of 14 must take the oath of citizenship. This is the last step in the citizenship process. The citizenship ceremony ends with the issuance of a citizenship certificate issued to each new citizen. Citizenship ceremonies are scheduled throughout the year and across the country. Special ceremonies are conducted on several occasions, such as on Canada Day and during Citizenship Week. Upon receipt of a successful result of the citizenship test, a citizenship ceremony is hosted by a presiding officer wherein the petitioners will be required to repeat the citizenship oath. The presiding officer is usually a citizenship judge or a member of the Order of Canada. There have been instances wherein the presiding officer has been a community leader or a school principal. It is the citizenship staff who select the appropriate presiding officer for the event. So what is the oath? Here it is. I swear or affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors, and that I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada and fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen. That's it. So think about it. What are some responsibilities that our oath places on us in exchange for our rights and freedoms? Well, a lot of it has to do with allegiance to the monarch and fulfilling your duties as a Canadian citizen, okay? And you will faithfully observe the laws of Canada. Somewhat vague, okay, but that's probably done purposely. I'm going to skip this here. You can look at it if you want, but this was just a case study, a scenario. All right, whereas the American citizenship oath is a lot more detailed, a lot more specific, probably something I would give a little bit higher marks as far as content going, okay, because they actually give some exemplars. So here it is. I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen, that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required to by law, that I will perform non-combative service in the armed forces of the United States when required by the law, that I will perform work of national importance under the civilian direction when required by the law, a lot of redundancy here, and that I will take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, so help me God. For some reason, I just like to read it with a certain John Huston-like voice. Not that I have the voice of John Huston. Man, I wish I had the voice of John Huston. Anyhow, I digress. A lot more specific responsibilities contained within that American citizenship oath. Anyways, talk amongst yourselves if you must. All right, so think about that oath of the United States. And what do you see as the most striking difference between the Canadian and American oaths? Explain. Well, I see a little bit difference. I mean, one, the Canadian is basically how some of you answer questions. It's pretty vague and nondescript, and I mean it's to the point. Okay, but it's not very specific. And then this person here with the American citizenship oath, I mean, a lot more detailed. I still wouldn't give it a perfect mark because I would say there's a lot of redundancy, a lot of overused words, etc. But they're asking a lot more of you in this oath, at least specifically. All right, the last thing before I end off this first part is the idea of dual and multiple citizenships. Please read 455 and 456 in your textbook and think to yourself, should Canada allow for multiple citizenships, dual citizenships? Why or why not? Okay, what are some of the pros and cons of having someone that's both a Canadian citizen and American citizen, or someone that's from, say, Mexico and Canada, etc.? Is there an issue of loyalties being like contending, for example, like we learned about in Social 20? Other issues like that. Should Canada consider changing its immigration legislation? If so, to what? All right. So we're going to stop at that point. We'll do part 2 another time. But anyways, take care.